The backyard smelled like charcoal and my mother's prize roses, a sickly sweet combination that had defined every family reunion since I could remember. Paper lanterns swayed in the evening breeze. 63 relatives spread across the lawn, and I was tucked away near the drinks table, exactly where my mother had positioned me. "Out of the photos," she'd said when I arrived. "You know how you always look so tired?" My grandmother, my mother's mother, sat in her wheelchair near the gazebo, watching everything with eyes that missed nothing. 91 years old, former federal judge, and the only person in 3 generations of this family who'd ever treated me like I mattered. My sister Brooke was holding court near the buffet, showing off her new engagement ring to a cluster of admiring aunts. 3rd engagement in 5 years. My parents had funded all the deposits. Before I tell you what happened next, you need to understand what it meant to grow up as the family disappointment. I was the second daughter in a family that worshipped firstborns. Brooke was the star homecoming queen, sorority president, the kind of daughter my mother could brag about at her country club. I was the quiet one, the awkward one, the one who preferred books to parties and numbers to small talk. My parents never hid their preference. They just called it something else. When Brooke wanted to study abroad in Paris for a semester, my parents found $30,000. When I asked about a summer research program that cost $2,000, my mother laughed and said, "We're not made of money." Olivia, when Brooke's credit cards got out of control, my parents paid them off and called it a fresh start. When I asked for help with my first apartment's security deposit, my father told me I needed to learn financial responsibility. Financial responsibility. They loved that phrase. "Olivia doesn't understand money," my mother would tell relatives at gatherings like this one. "She's always been a bit impractical." The truth was, I understood money better than anyone in this family. I had a master's degree in economics. I worked as a quantitative analyst at a hedge fund, making $195,000 a year, plus bonuses that sometimes doubled my salary. I owned my apartment outright. I had a retirement account that would make my father weep. But they didn't know any of that. When I visited, I drove my old Subaru instead of my Tesla. I wore clothes from my closet's family visit, section-faded jeans, plain shirts, nothing that would invite questions. I let them believe I was struggling, barely getting by, the cautionary tale they needed me to be. My therapist, Dr. Eulerin, had explained it clearly. They assigned you a role before you could speak. You don't owe them an updated script. What none of them knew what I.D. kept secret for 7 years was that grandmother had seen through it all, and she'd been planning something. The reunion followed the usual pattern. Brooke commanded attention with stories about her wedding planning. My mother orbited around her, refilling her champagne, adjusting her hair for photos. My father discussed golf with uncles who pretended to be interested. No one asked about me. My husband Marcus stood beside me, his hand warm against my lower back. He'd grown up in a family that celebrated everyone equally. The first time he witnessed one of these reunions, he'd been so angry he couldn't eat for the rest of the night. Now he just stayed close and waited. "Brooke's fiancé's nice," he murmured, nodding toward the man hovering near my sister. "Her fiancés usually do." At first, he almost smiled. "How long do you give this one?" 8 months. Maybe 10 if he's patient. We'd made a game of it, dark humor to survive the darkness. Near the gazebo, my grandmother raised her hand. The gesture was small, almost imperceptible, but something in it made conversations pause, made heads turn. She'd spent 40 years on the federal bench. She knew how to command a room. "I'd like everyone's attention," she said. Her voice was thinner than it used to be, but it still carried. "I have an announcement." My mother hurried over, concern painted across her face. "Mother, are you feeling all right?" "Should we sit down, Patricia?" My mother sat. Grandmother's eyes found me across the lawn. "Olivia, would you come here, please?" The walk from the drinks table to the gazebo felt endless. I felt every pair of eyes on me, heard the whispered questions. Marcus walked beside me, steady as always. "Today is a significant day," Grandmother said when I reached her. "Your trust has matured." My mother leaned forward. "What trust?" Grandmother smiled, thin, sharp, satisfied. "The $3.5 million trust I established for Olivia when she was born. It matured today. She now has full access. The silence that followed was absolute. My father's face went gray. My mother's champagne glass trembled in her hand. Brooke's phone slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the patio stones. "That's not—" my mother started. "Mother, there must be some mistake. You never mentioned." "I never mentioned it to you." Grandmother's voice hardened. "I mentioned it to the only person who needed to know." The back door of the house opened, and a man in a tailored suit stepped out. Harold Chon, a state attorney, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than my mother's car payment. "Mrs. Patterson," Harold said, nodding to my grandmother. He set his briefcase on a nearby table and began removing documents. "The paperwork is ready for Olivia's signature, as discussed." My mother stood up so fast, she nearly knocked over her chair. "Harold, I don't understand. You've been our family attorney for 20 years. Why wasn't I informed?" "You weren't informed because you aren't a party to this trust," Harold said calmly. "Judge Patterson established it independently, with her own assets for her granddaughter Olivia. The terms specified that no one outside the arrangement would be notified until maturation." The terms specified. My mother turned to her mother, her face cycling through disbelief, betrayal, and fury. "Mother, how could you do this behind my back?" "Behind your back?" Grandmother laughed a dry, crackling sound. "That's interesting, coming from you. Should we discuss what you've done behind Olivia's back for 32 years? She gestured to Harold, who pulled a thick folder from his briefcase. "I've kept records," Grandmother continued. "Every dollar you've given Brooke versus Olivia. Every car, every tuition payment, every bailout, every fresh start you funded for one daughter while telling the other she needed to learn responsibility." Harold laid the spreadsheets on the table. Pages and pages of documentation. $412,000 for Brooke's education, including the semester abroad and the 2 years of graduate school she never finished. 0 for Olivia's education. She paid her own way through scholarships and 3 jobs. My mother's face was red now. "That's not— Olivia never asked." $85,000 for Brooke's 3 engagement parties, dress deposits, and venue cancellation fees. A $50 check for Olivia's wedding that you forgot to attend because of Brooke's yoga retreat. "I was sick that weekend." "You were in Sedona." Grandmother's voice was ice. "I have the credit card statements." The relatives had gone silent. My mother's sister was staring at the spreadsheets like they contained nuclear codes. My uncle had set down his drink. Even the children had stopped running around. $45,000 in credit card debt paid off for Brooke in the past 3 years alone. When Olivia's car was totaled by an uninsured driver and she asked you for a loan, not a gift. A loan you told her she needed to learn to manage her finances better. She was irresponsible. She was 24, working 2 jobs, and taking night classes to finish her master's degree, Grandmother cut in. She asked for $3,000 to buy a used car so she could get to work. You said no. Then you bought Brooke a new BMW for her birthday the following month. My mother had no response. Brooke finally found her voice. "This isn't fair." "Grandma, I'm your granddaughter too. You can't just give everything to Olivia." "I'm not giving everything to Olivia," Grandmother said. "I'm giving Olivia what she's owed. You've already received your share through your parents, who took what should have been distributed equally and gave it all to you." She looked at the spreadsheets, then at Brooke. $892,000. That's what your parents have given you over the past 12 years, not including the trust from your great-aunt that was meant to be split between both granddaughters. Your father intercepted that check and deposited it into your account without telling Olivia it existed. My father went white. I had power of attorney. You had power of attorney to manage the funds, not to steal them. Grandmother's gaze was withering. I've discussed this with Harold. We've decided not to pursue legal action, given my health. But I want everyone here to understand exactly what kind of man my son-in-law is. The revelation continued. Harold produced more documents, bank statements, transfer records, a timeline of financial decisions that painted a damning picture. My parents had spent 32 years systematically funneling resources to Brooke while actively sabotaging my stability. They'd told relatives I was struggling so no one would offer help, while simultaneously telling me the family couldn't afford to assist. Every suspicion I'd ever had, every gaslit memory, it was all real, documented, undeniable. The trust, Grandmother said finally. Is my way of correcting what I couldn't fix while Patricia controlled the family narrative? She looked at me with eyes that had seen more than most people could imagine. I should have intervened sooner. I kept hoping your mother would change. She didn't, so I built you a safety net instead. Mother, my mother's voice was shaking now. You can't do this. That money should be, the family should decide together. The family? Grandmother's voice cracked like a whip. You mean you should decide? The way you decided Brooke deserved everything and Olivia deserved nothing. The way you decided to call your own daughter financially irresponsible while funding Brooke's every whim. You called her broke at Thanksgiving last year. In front of the entire family. You said she couldn't manage a piggy bank. I was there, Patricia. I heard you. The memory surfaced, my mother's casual cruelty, delivered with a laugh while Brooke and my aunts giggled along. I'd smiled through it, excused myself to the bathroom, and cried for 10 minutes before returning with my composure rebuilt. Olivia, grandmother said, turning to me, the trust is yours. The documents are ready. Harold will witness your signature, and then it's done. I stepped forward. My hands were steady as I took the pen. My mother lunged toward me. Olivia, wait. We need to talk about this. We can work something out as a family. We're not a family, I said. My voice came out calm, measured, the voice I'd practiced for years in Dr. Euleren's office. Families don't do what you did. Families do unspend 30 years telling one daughter she is not worth investing in while pouring everything into the other. That's not what happened. I have the spreadsheets, Mom. I gestured at the papers. I have the bank records. I have the credit card statements proving you were in Sedona during my wedding. You don't get to rewrite history anymore. I signed the documents. 1 signature, 2 signatures, initials, date. Harold notarized them on the spot. It's done, he said, sliding the completed papers into his briefcase. The funds will be accessible within 48 hours. I turned to leave. Marcus's hand found mine. Olivia, please. My mother's voice had changed, higher, desperate. I'm your mother. Whatever you think I did. I don't think you did anything. I know what you did. Grandmother documented all of it. And I'm done pretending it didn't happen so you can feel comfortable at family reunions. Brooke stepped in front of me. You can't just walk away with $3.5 million. That's not... I was supposed to what? Get everything like always? I looked at my sister. You've had 32 years of supposed to. I think you'll survive. My wedding is in 6 months. Then I suggest you get a job. I stepped around her. For the first time in your life, the parking lot was quiet. Marcus unlocked the car while I stood in the evening air, breathing deeply. The sun was setting, painting the sky in oranges and pinks, and I felt lighter than I had in years. You okay? He asked. I waited for the guilt. The second guessing. The familiar undertow of wondering if I'd been too harsh. If maybe they'd had reasons, if maybe I was the monster they'd always implied I was. Nothing came. I'm better than okay, I said. I think I just stopped auditioning for a role I was never going to get. He pulled me close. They never deserved you. I know, I think I finally believe it. The aftermath unfolded like clockwork. By the next morning, I had 71 missed calls. Parents, Brooke, aunts, uncles, cousins who'd never once reached out before. The texts were a masterclass in manipulation. Mom, you've broken this family. Your grandmother is clearly senile. Dad, that money belongs to the family. You're being selfish. Brooke, my wedding is in 6 months. I need your help. Then, 3 days later, Brooke again. The venue wants the deposit by Friday. This is your fault. I saved every message. Evidence that nothing had changed, that the family who called me irresponsible still saw me as nothing but a resource. By the end of the week, the calls had reached 93. I answered none of them. My mother showed up at my building on day 6. Security called up. I declined the visit. I watched on the lobby camera as she argued with the doorman, mascara streaking down her face, before finally leaving. Grandmother called that evening. Her voice was tired but satisfied. Your mother isn't speaking to me, she said. I'm sorry. Don't be. I should have done this years ago. I kept hoping she'd change, but some people don't change, they just get better at hiding. 2 months later. Saturday morning. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of our apartment. The one I bought outright 4 years ago. The one my family still didn't know about. Marcus was making breakfast, singing off-key to the radio. The smell of coffee and pancakes filled the air. My phone sat silent on the counter. The calls had stopped weeks ago. My parents had shifted to a new narrative telling relatives I'd manipulated my grandmother, that her age had made her vulnerable, that I'd stolen from the family. The relatives who'd actually been at the reunion knew better. Aunt Catherine had called to apologize for never seeing what was happening. Uncle Robert had sent a card. Even a few cousins had reached out tentatively, wanting to know the real story. Brooke's wedding had been postponed, then canceled. Derek's family had apparently asked too many questions about the financial situation, and the answers hadn't satisfied them. She was back to living with my parents, no job, no plan. Just the slowly dawning realization that the safety net she'd always taken for granted had holes. I'd heard through Catherine that my parents were struggling. They debuilt their lifestyle on 2 incomes plus the expectation that they'd never have to fund both daughters equally. Now that the truth was out, distant relatives had stopped offering loans, stopped making excuses, stopped enabling. Grandmother called every Sunday. We talked about books, about Marcus's promotion and my new project at work. She never mentioned my parents. Neither did I. I used to think family meant tolerance. Absorbing cruelty and calling it love, accepting less so others could have more. Now I understood something different. Real family chooses you. Real family sees your worth without needing spreadsheets to prove it, though sometimes spreadsheets help. Real family doesn't spend 30 years building one daughter up by tearing the other down. The $3.5 million wasn't about money. It was about justice. It was my grandmother refusing to let the narrative my parents had constructed stand unchallenged. It was proof tangible, documented, undeniable that I had always been worth investing in. Even when the people who should have known that best were too busy investing elsewhere. Marcus set a plate of pancakes in front of me. Your sister called the building again last night. I know. I saw the log. What do you want to do? I thought about it. About Brooke, who'd never had to think about money. Now learning what it meant to need something she couldn't just ask for. About my parents, whose carefully constructed narrative was crumbling. About the years I'd spent invisible, undervalued, dismissed. Nothing, I said finally. I want to do nothing. I want to eat pancakes with my husband on a Saturday morning and not think about people who only remember I exist when they need something. He smiled. That sounds perfect. The morning sun warmed my face. Somewhere my family was scrambling. Somewhere the roles they'd assigned were finally breaking down. And here in my home with my husband, in my life I was finally completely free. The day I stopped being their version of me was the day I started being mine. If you've ever been the family disappointment who succeeded anyway, share your story below. You're not alone, and your success doesn't need their approval. Hit like if you've had to build yourself up while others tried to tear you down. Every share helps someone still fighting.